Aloha! My name is Owen Qualley. This is a little black dog. He's my dog. His name's Jim. And he's a Min Pinchapoo. Might be all I need to tell you. I was born at a very young age. And that was in the state of Kansas, town called Olathe, in a hospital that is no longer a hospital. It's an FAA facility, I've recently found out. I'll get to that, the recently finding out part, eventually, in this story. So, I was born there. My mom was got divorced about a year later from my father, who was a military guy, and then special forces sort of cat. And then I went up to Milwaukee, Wisconsin with my mom at around the age of 1.5. My sister, who's a year and a half older than me. And then we lived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, with summers spent in Lafayette, Louisiana when I was a kid, because my mom was single, and she didn't get married till I was 10. And so until then, it was every summer with my grandparents. And so you get me to that point there at age 10, and I've never slept in the same house for a whole year. Never lived in the same house. Moved, never lived in one for longer than 8 months. I think that was the longest I did. Maybe 9. Yeah, 9. Although we lived in the same one every year. It was a condo in both places. My grandparents moved around, though, so that changed. And then I got to high school. Well, my mom got married, and then so I started spending summers at home, and that worked out a little bit better in some ways. I started getting jobs, living a life. And all this time I'm allergic to mown grass. I'm allergic to most animals. Jim's hypoallergenic. I can touch him. And I'm allergic to pollens and dusts and molds, an incredible variety of different things. I'm allergic to a lot of stuff, but not Jim, and that's good. So I couldn't play sports, I couldn't do a lot of things, and so I was this allergenic kid who was reading a lot. Kind of couldn't see very well. I couldn't see at distances very well, which I hid till 8th grade. They didn't figure out until I was going into high school that I needed to have glasses. And then, so I got glasses finally going into high school. It was read a lot. Went to, my freshman year in high school was my 6th different school from K through 9. And then all in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I got kicked out of a Catholic school. I'm problematic. I've got my issues. And my sister said this thing to me, though, going into high school. She said, maybe you should join choir. It's a nice choir. It's a good teacher. It's a really interesting group of people. Maybe you'd like them. And so I joined choir, had never sung before, and that worked out really nicely because I got into music. And after midway through my junior year, I went on a student exchange to New Zealand. Spent a whole year there with the Maori host family the first half, and then because I was delinquent and crazy, got kicked out of that house and moved to the home of an expatriate American philosopher who was there doing he was a local city councilman and elected official, and had his own 5-acre subsistence farm. Cliff Lee, real neat guy. And so he taught me about philosophy and farming and gardening and things like that there on his farm, milked the cows. Grew up in Wisconsin, had to go to New Zealand to milk a cow. Is the way it turned out. Also had to go to Wisconsin or New Zealand to hear the music of the Violent Femmes, because I had this very cloistered life. Turns out that the bass player for the Violent Femmes had a house kitty corner to my high school while I was going there. And then I came back from New Zealand, spent a half year being a high school senior, and then went directly to college. Wanting to study philosophy, wanting to be a man of the world and understand things and tell stories that mattered and change stuff, and not knowing what to tell stories about. or what value it would have. Having read a bunch of books of philosophy, I was like, okay, the thing I can see most clearly is that the guys I really respect didn't go to college, they founded schools. So I was like, all right, so if I'm supposed to found a school, how does that work? And I looked into guys like Plato and Socrates, Aristotle, and you know, just a whole mess of different other cats, Jesus and Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha that knew the Tao, you know, like Lao Tzu and Confucius, and or Kung Fu Tzu, as his name would be. Read the Bhagavad Gita and learned about Quetzalcoatl in America. So I studied everything that I could to find out, you know, the different perspectives on what the world is really supposed to be. And I wanted to travel the world and make music, or not make music yet, but learn languages and write philosophy. And I found out that first I would have to do 3 years of prerequisites before I'd be allowed to take any of the classes I wanted to. And I said, you know, I'm not sure. And then this girl handed me a book of philosophy by a character named Ayn Rand. It was a book called Atlas Shrugged, which is a dangerous book. Caused me to turn out, just dropped out of society. Encouraged me to feel like I shouldn't contribute to a thing that I didn't comprehend, which I found to have parallels, oddly enough, in the Bible and in the Bhagavad Gita and in the Quran and in all the other holy books. There's these parallels. The story of John Galt is just a classic archetypical arrangement, but it touched me. So within 2 weeks, I had decided I was going to drop out of school, get a job, and and this is an event that really changed how everything worked, because my mom and my dad were coming up. I had gone to summer session in half of the first semester. Halloween was about to happen. They were coming from Milwaukee to Minneapolis, where I was going to college, and they were paying for it. And that was going to be Halloween weekend. And I was walking to my friend John's house. Abu, he calls himself, he said at the time that he was a prophet, and that his message was don't hurt, which I like, and rather simple. He wouldn't elaborate at all. Very helpful in a lot of ways. So this prophet, Abu, really named John, I went to his house, or I was on my way to his dorm from my dorm, and on the way there, I go over this railroad bridge. And what should happen to be under the railroad bridge but the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey circus train? It's a little after dark. You could see the moon up in the sky. It was gorgeous. I was so excited. Late fall, or early fall going on, mid-fall, whatever. And I walked down to the railroad. Could see the dorm room that I needed to go to. You could see the train from John's dorm room, it turned out. I knocked on the caboose of the train, and this lady in a pink bathrobe opens the door. And she goes, "Can I help you?" I said, "Yeah, I wanted to find out how to join the circus." She said, "You get applications at the building where we work, which is the Target Center downtown." Slams the door in my face, doesn't even say goodbye. I eventually found out that had it been because that was the ringmaster's wife, had it been the next day after I'd been hired, that would have been my last day of employment, because you don't knock on the caboose. I got lucky and got forgiven that. And the way I got forgiven that was I went into the building, or I went to the Target Center the next day after I went and talked to John, and he was like, "You're crazy." I was like, "Good, that's what I needed to be, crazy." Because everyone else seems to be sane, and sane appears to be causing more problems than it's solving. And the point of philosophy is, you're just accepting that you're gonna find some way to tell the story that's gonna help get things done. So you gotta find out what's wrong, what's right, all that thing working out together. And like Socrates said, his goal was to be the midwife to men's souls so that they could give birth to ideas. And so like that's really sort of what I wanted to focus into. And so I went to the Target Center the next day, filled out their little application. I'm allergic to all these animals, right? And all this, so I couldn't do any of the animal handling, couldn't do all kinds of stuff. And then you get, but there was, and I had no experience doing some things, and I didn't want to lie and get a job that didn't work, but I checked that I could sew, because my grandmother had taught me to sew. So this little man, Leszgato, he's like 5'2", used to be a trapeze artist. He's from Poland, and he fell one time from the rigging and shattered his legs. So now he just walks around on the ground, and he's the floor manager, or he did then. And so Leszek looks at what I got there, and he's looking at the whole list, going, no, 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 That's the way he would do it. He would always look around and, you know, he's watching everything else going on. And then finally he goes, you sew? And I said, yes, my grandmother taught me. I've got some samples at home I could go get. And he was like, no, 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 come with me. So he takes me into the Target Center. We go in through this huge, like, semi-bay door for, you know, unloading, you know, things like huge, you know, NBA arena stuff, including our huge, I got to, anyways, all the stuff, the elephants could get through it. You know, there's all the elephants lined up on either side of this pathway that we had to walk through, and get to the end of that, and he gets to this sort of spot, and he looks back, and he looks at me, and he looks around, and then he takes me a little further in, and when he takes a right, and then there's these big plywood boxes, like 8 foot by 8 foot by 4 foot, huge rectangular boxes made of 8x4s, and a couple of them put together. And so these huge things on wheels, caster wheels. And between them there was a curtain, a sheet actually hung. And they're in this corner of this space, and you open up on the inside, and they're big wardrobe boxes. They're full of all these costumes. And then there's this little old guy. He looks kind of like a mix between Jim Henson and Willie Nelson. Real great old guy. And he had this bent up finger. And Jim looks up at me, and he goes, "Can I help you?" And Leszek goes, "Jim, his new wardrobe." Jim looks at me, and he goes, "Welcome to the circus, brother." And Leszek walks away, and I said, "Wow, was that the job interview? Did I just get the job? What just happened?" And he goes, "Oh, yeah, did you walk past the elephants?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah, if you can walk past the elephants, you can work for the circus. You can't get past the elephants, it doesn't matter how good at what you do you are. They're going to pick you up and throw you against the wall and break all your bones with their trunk." And I said, "Oh." And then they told me all the story. Eventually I heard all the stories of people who shouldn't have worked for the circus. People who came to work high on stuff, and the elephants decided they were different people then. Bad deal. There are no methamphetamine addicts working for the circus. Very simple reason. The elephants would kill them. Well, anyways, so I got hired by the circus, and then the next day that was Friday, and Saturday my parents were there. And I met them between shows in my black jumpsuit at a restaurant near the Target Center, and I had called them from a payphone at a bar, because I had already cleaned out my dorm, sold all the books, dropped out of college. It was over. I was done. I had moved into the circus train, and they showed up to see me between meals, or between shows on a 2-show day. And I had already done my first show, and I was like, "Yeah, I got this great job. It's amazing. This is what I'm gonna do." And my mom couldn't stand it. She was crying, and my dad was like, my stepdad was trying to figure out how to deal with the whole thing. Like, he was trying to be somewhat, you know, like, open to me having a job, and that was interesting and exciting. He was trying to accept it, but my mom was just like, "Don't do this. Come home, come home, come home." And I was just eventually like, I left her there, left her crying at the table. Nothing I could do. I had to go to work. So I went to work. Spent 6 months with the circus, and then left sewing costumes and men's wardrobe, and then I moved over to the backstage department and painted the wagons and moved those around, and the floats and things like that. Got to put headdresses on elephants. Turns out I'm not allergic to elephants. Cool stuff, huh? And then I left the circus the day I would have had to have signed the paperwork to become a Teamster, because if you work backstage at the circus, you're a Teamster. And having dropped out of college towards the purpose of not making commitments that I wasn't ready to make, I certainly wasn't going to join the Teamsters, especially after having read Ayn Rand. Like, you know, like, she's all anti-union in the first place. And so, like, although I think people misconstrue a lot of that, it always surprises me what people will misconstrue in what ways. And so, yeah, then I continued on. I was trying to still figure it out, what to do with my life, and or not really what to do with my life. I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to pursue philosophical inquiry, which, the way Plato described it in the Republic, says that until you're 35, if you are really supposed to be a philosopher, then you'll end up finding that you try everything and you are good enough at it to do it, but then you want to do more. You want to do different things. You always want to try something new. That's what the philosopher is apt to do. Some people, they find what they're going to do, and they do it. And they do it well, and they get rewarded for it, and they repeat it, and it really functions great. The philosopher is usually going to be this guy who can do everything, but isn't doing everything. Who has leadership potentials, who has skills and attributes, you know, but who is instead sitting back and letting the moment come to him when it's appropriate to do the things. So I took a vow of poverty, of commitments that led me through a cycle of, what do you call it? Different volunteer opportunities. So I've run radio stations, I've been to a couple culinary arts schools, worked at all kinds, done everything you'd ever want to do in a restaurant, done maintenance for different hotels and things like that, big resorts. And everywhere I went, whenever I put the circus on my application, boom, that interview always went great. And to this day, with only one exception, being the Salvation Army, I got a job I had with them as a bell ringer. They let me play guitar while ringing, instead of ringing the bell in San Luis Obispo, California, where it's warm enough to do so. So they paid me to do that, and I gave them good notice. But other than that, the circus is the only job I ever had that I gave good notice to. You know, when I was in New Zealand, I started with Aloha, and I'm going to finish with Aroha. When I was in New Zealand, there's a greeting that I was privileged to be someone who could be part of, and it says, "Haere mai, haere mai, haere mai, aroha, aroha, aroha nue." And the haere mai is welcome. And you're repeating it thrice so that you are speaking welcome to those who actually are present here and hearing you. Welcome to all those who are they personally represent, and then welcome to all the people in the world after that. And it's an opening and it's a closing when you do it with the aroha, aroha, aroha nue. And the aroha is hello, goodbye, and I love you. It's really the breath of the world. The breath of my being is stirred by the movement of the breath of your being. It's an incredible word. I love the aloha, which is aroha in Maori. And nui, that's big. And so aroha, aroha, aroha nui. That's the I love you, I love everyone around us, and I love the whole world. And that's the aroha nui, the big love for everything. And with that.